Welcome to No Reserve. Today we will talk about last night's sale at Christie's with Chairman of Christie's Americas, Marc Porter, and we are joined by collector, writer, dealer, Adam Lindemann. Adam, what did you think of last night's sale?
I thought it was amazing. I mean, Christie's is really good at selling bones.
And how about selling art?
I mean, it's great to have Marc here, and thanks for inviting me, Josh. I don't know, my expertise is more in contemporary, and I've always liked this mix of different fields. I mean, I've always mixed Calder with tribal, with contemporary. I mean, I like the idea of the mix. I'm just trying to read the tea leaves to see what it says about the art market moving forward. I think the sale did well, things sold, but we have to sort of think about what's selling and why, because there's a lot of things that we don't usually see in Christie's auctions that are not here.
Marc, I'll give you the chance first for the sort of normal Christie's corporate response, and then we'll dig a little deeper into beneath the surface.
Well, Josh, thank you for joining us here at Christie's, and Adam, it's always wonderful to see you. You didn't mention, Josh, that Adam is also fluent in Mayan glyphs, something I've known since we went to school together many decades ago. I think instead of the normal, I think we should talk about what's really going on in the world right now, which is a very challenging political, economic, health, social period in time. And I do think that we see that reflected in a somewhat less buoyant sale last night. Not dramatically so in terms of the kind of depths of a market that we saw, let's say in 2008 or in other periods, but surely there was a pullback. I see that our traditional and long-standing clients continued to participate, and there were a few new clients, but I think in this environment it's relatively difficult to have much new client acquisition because people are still so tentative about gathering and also just learning enough to focus on collecting art if they haven't already started.
The broadcast turned the glitzy meter from, say, 0.1 in July to 99 in last night's sale. Do you think it actually had an effect on any of the actual buying and bidding?
I think that we will continue to experiment on exactly how we present the auctions. I think that a confidence in how we communicate through technology and on a digital basis is important in conveying confidence to potential buyers and sellers about the efficiency of the market. I don't think that it's the choice of music or choice of color per se that does that, but just rather the ever-evolving shift from a live auction room all of the time to a virtual space.
Marc, I wonder if this digital world gives the illusion of more transparency, but I noticed, for instance, last night a number of big lots were withdrawn before the auction even happened. And in the past, you'd be sitting there in the room with your catalog looking at Martin and having to cross it out, or Matisse and cross it out. Digitally, you don't even notice that happened. So it's almost as if they never existed. Now, I understand why that's advantageous for the post-spin or for the client whose work is in serious danger of being bought in. But it's kind of like a nuance that I'm curious about.
Yeah, it's a very interesting observation, and as you say, it's long been a practice to withdraw lots, either because a dispute has arisen, perhaps about title or something like that, or not infrequently about a lack of interest in a particular lot and the desire to sell it another way. It's true that online and digital has created this new way of objects disappearing from the market, and I think that actually was created with the introduction of online sales and online offerings, especially when there wasn't a permanent paper record of objects for sale. So I do think that there is an element to knowledge about what has been on the market that will be more challenging to figure out, but I have no doubt that people interested in technology will figure out also how to capture information earlier, aggregate it, and ensure that people know, even in more broad terms, ultimately, what has been on the market in various places.
Now, Mark, we've spent a lot of time talking over the years about the auction house's responsibility to museums and the public. Personally, I think that a lot of the media turns the morality police into the auction house taking that role, which I think is unfair since you're a marketplace. But there is a plethora of museum selling and not for recirculating the funds for acquisitions going on this year. I wonder your thoughts on that.
That's part of the territory of being an auction house because the transactions are public and the information is aired publicly. So I view it as not unlike questions about restitution, questions about patrimony. When things come to market, you have the opportunity for the public to engage in a discussion about it, which doesn't necessarily happen, let's say, when we do private transactions. I've actually found this discussion about museum deaccessioning and how the proceeds are used to be extremely interesting because it goes so profoundly, and has been cast so profoundly as a discussion about equity, access to capital for important other social projects. And I think it's worthwhile having a discussion about what the role of museums are, what the role of historical houses and museums are, what the role of educational institutions that might happen to have very, very expensive objects are. I think this is a conversation that we have to have in the broader cultural community, and I welcome people with all opinions about this particular subject to discussion. What I don't especially relish are deacquisitions or deaccessioning, which are secret and which don't involve the community.
Adam, are you more likely to buy something because it's being sold by a museum, or are you likely to think, wow, that piece can't be that good if the museum is willing to let it go?
Well, I think it's wonderful to buy something that's been in a museum. I mean, it's like whenever you go to, you see something that's been in a single collection as opposed to having been traded 10 times in 10 years. We all relish things that have been held for decades by a single owner, a single family, a foundation, an institution. I think that this conversation about deacquisitions from museums is long overdue. And it all has to do with the tax system in our country, whereas people gave these things and they wrote it off their taxes, and they gave it under the condition that the museum would hold it forever and other people would give the money to maintain the storage. Well, now we live in a country where our government does not support the museum system, whereas in Europe it does. So here, now these museums depend on donors, and the donors aren't giving money because the donors are suffering financial stress. So what happens? How is the museum supposed to pay its bills? I think the greater macro scare of this whole concept is if all the museums start selling their collections, they're going to flood the market. I don't know. This is a big onion that needs to be unraveled. And I mean, I think what Baltimore is selling, what I saw is fantastic. I mean, anybody would want work like that. A big Warhol
Well,
Last
apparently the
Supper.
Baltimore Museum doesn't want work like that because they're selling. So I don't know about anyone.
Josh is right. I mean, Josh, you're 100% right. I mean, why would a museum sell stuff like that? What is it? They have a Warhol. There's a fantastic, what were the other two works?
Bryce
that were
Martin and
announced?
I think Clifford Still was the third.
The
Is that right,
Martin
Mark?
is, yeah, the Martin is fantastic. The Clifford Still is amazing. And they weren't suffering financial need yet, so they're just sort of being forward thinking. I don't know what else they own, but then, then it's the broader question is now, is the museum world in the business of like buying and selling and trading? I mean, are they going to decide what to keep and what to sell? And it's a bigger question. But I did think historically that this sort of absolute rule of no deacquisitions and never selling was a bit absurd.
So both SF MoMA selling a Rothko and Baltimore in the past selling other artworks strictly to make up for lost time buying works by people of color and women. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is there another way that the museums should be going more into their bins and saying, this is more extraneous material? I mean, the Everson selling a Pollock painting, I have a hard time with that. They don't have anything else that they could have replaced that to get $12 million?
This is a big question. How do you right the wrongs of the past? Well, on the other hand, the past is the past. So we're not going to wipe out Andy Warhol or Roy Lichtenstein or Marcel Duchamp. There's no question that in the 20th century, there's a myopic view, and there's lots of art and lots of artists whose work has not been appreciated and needs to be seen now. But who's going to pay for it? That's a big problem. I want to ask Marc a question. It's good that we all have opinions about museums and about culture and institutions, and of course we care for those people who work at these museums, and it's a terrible economic moment we're in for so many people. It's terrifying. But Marc, do you believe, as chairman of Christie's, do you see more museums in the future selling, deacquisitioning things? Is this the beginning of a larger trend from where you sit? Because you have a much better view than Josh or I do. And second of all, if they do sell, where is the market for those things? Is there a market for a bigger, broader museum selling process?
Well, I definitely see museums planning to sell more. That's been especially true since the relaxation of the guidelines that offer advice to the most important museums in the country that allows them to deaccession not only to build their collection by buying other works of art, but also to use the funds for the care of the collections. Once in any situation, whether it's politics or museum practice, once there's been one small step taken, it's not unusual that there's yet another and another and another. I think that the point that you raised earlier, Adam, about the volume is extremely important. On a rather non-controversial basis over the past year, we've seen major museums in the classic way selling parts of their collection which were less important and often in great volume. So during the 20th century, places like the Met and the Art Institute of Chicago ended up with very big warehouses full of less than very, very top quality Asian works of art. And they were both extremely smart, I think, to sell these objects into the market as the Asian market was really booming, and to take that money and put it into buying the very best of art from those cultures. So that's one type of, I think, relatively non-controversial museum activity in the market.
Now, one of the goals of No Reserve is not just to talk about the art market, but to couch it a little bit in the world around us and the social realities of the time. So when I'm asking each of you to look forward maybe through the rest of the year, what's going to go on in the art business, it has to also be couched around the effect of the election. So there's some disagreement as to whether the election will affect the art market. So both of you, what do you see for the next 3 months? Mark?
Well, I do believe that the election will affect the art market. I'm not specifically focused on which person. I am personally very focused on which person wins the election, but I don't think that that's the primary way the art market will be affected. I feel that the distrust in the media and the confusion that's been sown about the voting process will occupy us, as it should, for much of November and possibly into next year.
On that note, thank you, Mark. Now, Adam, the same question, but I might want to also, as a thank you, note that you came here just an hour before the opening of your new gallery space, 120 East 65th Street, this afternoon. So thank you for coming. And your thoughts going forward?
Well, Josh, thanks for inviting me, and I'm excited about opening a new gallery space at 120 East 65th Street. Venus is moving to a townhouse. I'm showing a Creole artist from Louisiana, Andrew Lamar Hopkins, it's his first show in New York, and it's going to be an exciting moment for him and for people who will discover this work. But going back to what you were saying about history and museums changing and selling art to buy artists of color or women or things that are missing, it reminded me of a trip I did once as a child to Egypt. And we were looking at an Egyptian temple with the most beautiful hieroglyphs. I might have been 12 or 14 years old. And I remember the archaeologist, explained to us that the temple had been converted into a church. And he showed us on various columns where over these beautiful hieroglyphs, a Coptic cross had been carved into the column because it was now a church. And I think that same process that happened 3,000 years ago can happen to us. The most solid cultural icons of our time can be torn down and replaced by other things. I think that process will continue, and we'll continue to be surprised by it, but it's happening, and it's happening faster and faster in the age of communication and social media and all these things that we both enjoy and suffer. As far as the election, I can only think that the art market is somewhat tied to the stock market. The stock market seems implausibly at an all-time high, in large part in my belief that because it's a public market, so people can buy and sell freely, and that has been valued more than ever. And that's why auctions will continue to also thrive, because it has the perception of being a public market, and people feel that they can buy and sell freely. I think as long as the stock market stays healthy, the art market will too.
Well, thank you, Mark and Adam, for joining No Reserve. We touched on critical issues of the time, like the election, and more importantly, my new haircut.